So today we're doing a workshop session. We do these once a month, usually in the middle of the month. Today is Are You Done Yet? It's the middle of the year. Our program is kind of going over the course of the entire year, going from ideation, being a writer, to finished product, becoming an author, putting something into the marketplace. Before we actually get into the conversation, let's say hello to the folks that are co-hosting today. Heidi, you're usually hosting, but today, just hanging out. Do you want to give us a progress report? You've got a lot to report, I feel like.
I will try. There's a little bit of an issue going on here, so I apologize. I have to shut the mic off. Yeah, I'm trying to finish up this novella, and I'm starting to edit the larger work, which is the second book in the Songless series. The novella is part of that world, but it's sort of a prequel or an ancillary project. I don't know what term you would use for it, because you could kind of, on a time.
Supplemental,
sure. Okay. So I'm working on those two things. I was playing around with covers. That was kind of fun. And I'm probably going to start at some point doing an audiobook for the novella. So these are the things I've all got floating around right now. I'm trying not to start anything else.
Yeah, fair, reasonable. But in the grand scheme of things, since last month when we did the workshop where we really do these progress check-ins, you got your audiobook out. I feel like that is an important thing to talk about.
I did. I guess I did it. It was last week, so I think I got it out right after.
You're over it now. 1 week passed,
I'm over
you're
it.
just,
I'm over it. No, yeah. I do. I have it out. It's up on Audible. It's I'm kind of in awe that the thing is finally done. It was quite a circus for a lot of reasons. So yeah. If anyone wants a promo code, I can offer you that.
Also, put it up in the nest.
All right, I will do that.
In the meantime, Jagi, you are co-hosting today. I think this is the first time we've had you co-hosting, or were you co-hosting with us last week?
It is. This is the first time. Yeah. And sorry about the confusion. My font was too big, and when I made it small enough to see the button on the pop-up, I hit the wrong thing.
Well, it's how it goes. I understand. But now that you've done it once, it's going to be...
Now I know. Yeah. Now it will never be a problem again.
And that's the issue with the first time that you do something. Here on the workshop, we always give a progress report. So tell us about, report to us on your progress.
My progress is that I finished the short story that I had planned out months ago, but hadn't had a chance to write for Fantastic Schools Familiars. So it was a short story about Lucky the Dragon, who is a favorite among the characters from my series, on his own, having to solve a problem among the other familiars at the school. So I got to, put different familiars on stage. And one of the fun parts about it was that I'd had someone pay at a Kickstarter to name a character, and he thought he was just naming a character who would be mentioned. But it seemed to me unfair to make him wait 2 years till I get back to that series. So I thought I'd mention her in the short story. Well, when I started writing the short story, she ended up as a major character. And since the guy was naming it after his wife, he was just delighted with the story. So I don't know what the other readers will think, but it really was, it went over well with the gentleman who had paid for the character name. So that was a lot of fun. I was glad to be able to do that. And it will go into print as a short story instead of waiting. I mean, I'll put her in the book at some point too, but this way he didn't have to wait a long time. And then I got back to working on my regular novel I'm working on at the moment. So that was joyful too.
Very cool. I'm glad to hear it. I feel like these workshops, in the middle of the month are a good way of kind of gauging how much we can get done, or looking back at what we did get done or completed once a month. I like them that way. Here's an interesting thing. I'll give a progress check-in. as well, because I'm making progress. I'm doing things. The audiobook I had submitted for this month, I all-time bonehead plays. I was like, why is this taking so long? I didn't realize, for whatever reason, all of a sudden they're like, hey, they had emailed me, do you want to release a supplemental PDF with this audiobook? No, I never do. I never do that for any of these. Why are you holding this up for this now? Not any of the others has this occurred. And all of a sudden they're like, we'll release this after you get back to us. And it's like, oh my God, this was supposed to be out last week. So hopefully tomorrow. I had messaged them yesterday and they told me, I think 48 hours or something. So it might even go live now, who knows? There can't possibly be that much. It's a very short audiobook. So, hopefully that'll come along. Also, Heidi has been having a listen to the audiobook I'm preparing for next month's release. It is a cover of a popular, well, maybe not so popular, but of a known story from the past. Hey, JF, we got a request for you. Bring you up. So basically, that is going to be an audio drama production. I'm working on the cover design for that. I'm working on the sound effects for that right now. It's coming along. It's about 40 minutes. So it's, in terms of short stories, it's there. It's in the wheelhouse. Looking forward to getting that one out. I like the story a lot. I am considering if maybe it should be a narration only and audio drama release. I really don't know if I'm going to do that, because at 40 minutes, then you're looking at an hour and 20 minutes to do both of the tracks. I don't know. Kicking it around. Finally, also trying to make some progress on the paperback that I'll release this fall. So I'm about 25% done with the layout on that. And, hopefully even today, I'll make a little progress on it while we're here in this session. I try to use this stuff for that. But in the meantime, JF, you've come up. Also, Nicholas and Tom, if you guys want to come up and talk, these workshops are kind of progress report, hangout sessions. We do have a topic and we will get into that shortly. But this is an open stage. We hang out. JF, you haven't been up in a while, and I feel like we're kind of lucky to have you. So maybe give us a progress report.
Sure. Hey, sorry, I was chewing. I'm having lunch right now. But hey, I am deep into writing my. I'm writing a historical. I don't know if I mentioned that here. I'm writing a historical fiction slash fantasy book about that involves Vlad the Impaler.
Very cool.
And I'm about 16,000 words into it. I'm on the eighth chapter, which is pretty good for me. It's the longest I've written to date. It's because I'm usually, I got my start as a short story writer on Medium. So this is by far the longest thing I've written, and I've got a ways to go because there's still a lot of action I've got to get to, which is going to it's going to play into how the characters move forward, and which will then govern the action, taking it all the way to the end. And it's interesting to delve into this because I feel like I have a little bit of latitude with Vlad, because there's the historical stuff, but they're actually, because it was in the 1400s, there's not a ton of written records. So it's
limited first source material.
Exactly, but it actually, because what a lot of the book deals with is his relationship with his first wife, which we know almost nothing about. I mean, there's even conjecture on what her name was.
Fertile ground, then.
Yeah, and I picked her name from it was like mentioned in passing on like a Romanian tourism website. And it was like, okay, that sounds that sounds good. But nobody knows very much about her. So it's just kind of looking at their relationship and how their relationship develops.
Cool. Yeah, appreciate it. You'll have to give us some check-ins along the way. When are you planning to complete it, or do you not know? Or
I'm a teacher, so and during the summer it's like, oh yeah, you have the summer off. You can write then. It's like, no, I have two children who have tons of activities, and I'm kind of running them here, there, thither, and yon. Um, Along with a bunch of other stuff that we tend to do, other projects we do during the summer. So I actually honestly have less time in the summer to write than more. Um, so I can't say definitively when I'll be done. I'm hoping to have at least the first draft finished by the end of the year. Um, Maybe before, because I feel like the last 3 or 4 chapters I've written have come very quickly. So I'm hoping that now that I've kind of hit a stride with the way I think things are going to progress, that it will go faster.
I dig it. Very cool. Yeah. Have to, like I said, keep us posted on progress. And once it gets close, or you're looking for beta readers, obviously take advantage of the community. Nicholas, you're up on
Will
stage.
do. Thank you.
Oh yeah, no problem.
Hello. Yeah, that sounds interesting. Vlad the Impaler. I love vampire stories. I love vampire versus werewolf stories. I have a story kind of outlined, and I hope that I can get to it someday, because I'm still not done with the project I'm working on. Actually, I saw this title of this space, "Are You Done Yet?" And I thought you were specifically subtweeting me. Actually, no.
We are.
I have a final draft completed, and it's the third final draft that I've completed. Final draft V3, and hopefully there's not 7 more of those versions.
It can't be a final draft if there are 3 of them. It's the next draft.
Well, it says final draft .docx on my computer, so I don't know what you make of that. But yes, no,
I get it.
Yeah.
Seems like you made a typing error.
You know, when you go through Amazon and you get like the author's draft copies or whatever, and they send a paperback to your house and it says not for resale on it. I have 11 of those on my shelf.
Torturing yourself.
I just edit better when I have and read better when I have a physical copy, and I continue to comb through and find little things here or there. Thankfully, at this point, it's down to very small things like, should this be a comma or should this be a period? But this is part 1 of the trilogy. It will be delivered this year, but no, unfortunately, Michael, I am not done yet.
That's how it goes. Here's the question for you, because we had talked about this. Do you believe that you will make a September release? Because I'm sort of, I'm trying to schedule out these podcasts, buddy. And
yes, I will release it on September 22nd. It is a long expected part.
Hell or high water. Is that what you're saying here?
Yeah. Right. No, this last read through that I did was really the number of markups I make each time continue to shrink, and I'm powering through. It's gonna you know what, it's gonna be the autumnal equinox, or at the very latest it's gonna be the winter solstice. It's one of those 2 dates.
It's a 3-month difference.
Yeah, well,
okay,
is what it is. Yeah. But it's gonna be this year, I promise.
Okay.
I appreciate you keeping me honest with these subtweets.
I didn't do it. As a matter of fact, this is a redeploy of a title that we used last year. We did this workshop technically last year as well. So we're revisiting. It was such a good name such a good space that we got back into it. Since we have all done our check-ins, we've ripped through some of this. Maybe let's get into the legit conversation, the actual discussion we have planned for today. As you know, we kind of stage a little bit of a pre-production meeting. Jagi was part of that for the first time last Thursday, and we've got some notes. And I feel like we've done the progress check-in. We've all done that. We're going to keep addressing some of that, but the meat of the discussion today, I think, is really about processing the work, right? The drafting, the writing, the editing. We can start anywhere. I think, at least in terms of the notes that we had, where we kicked things off was really with outlining. And I am an outliner, but my co-hosts are less interested in outlining. So let's hear some of their thoughts on it as opposition, or how they will tastefully select how to apply outlining as they choose.
I guess I'll go first. And I've said this here before, but I'll say it again. I'm very much in favor of outlining if you can do it. And what I mean by that is it's similar to a friend of mine. I once asked when I was in college whether he thought I should be a writer. And he said, you shouldn't become a writer unless you can't do anything else. And it took me a while to realize it didn't mean that I was incapable of doing another job. He meant that I couldn't stop writing. But this is a similar type of thing. If you can sit down and write an outline and you keep writing, I think that is an ideal way to do it, because you have an idea of where you're going and your ideas are coordinated and you're less likely to mess up. But I've just seen too many people sit down, start something I really liked, make a full outline, and the moment the outline's done, they stop. Their creative process freezes. And it happened to me. And that's how I know about this. I finished an outline of a book I'd written 12 chapters of in 1992, and I did not work on it again for several years. The only reason I went back to it is friends kept saying, hey, what's going on with that story? I really liked it. And I had to tear up the outline from chapter 12 on and completely redo it. And I eventually realized that it was because my creative process requires me to be creating new things each chapter in order to make it interesting, or at least about halfway. I found once I got about halfway through the work, I could outline the second half as to where what I'd already established was going. And a friend of mine once said, oh, I do that creative process you're talking about in the outlining part, and I just write from there. And she had no trouble with an outline. So my encouragement to new writers, or to anyone who's looking at it, is to try the outline, see if it works for you. But if it doesn't, don't abandon the project because your imagination stops. Just tear up the outline from wherever it feels organic to move forward and try again.
I mean, I think that's a great point you make, Judgy. It's like you can't, if you can outline and do it for sure, but don't let it entrap you. I mean, that's really the thing. So like for me, it's like I'll have an idea and I will start writing in that idea, and then I'll hit a wall and I'll sit down and I'll like put together, more of a flow chart. I'm not a big fan of, using the Roman numerals and doing the outline like, they told you and forced you to do with your essays and such. But I mean, it's just the idea of structure. So for me, I'll do a flow chart or something. It's like this happens, and I'll put it in a box, and then an arrow, and then this happens, and then this happens, just to kind of get myself going forward. It's not necessarily getting, writing this all out to the end, but just enough to go forward. But I feel, I mean, for me, it gets, for me to sit and spend all of my time putting together, you know, your outline was like, we have this section and then this paragraph is about this, that the essay thing we all learned in school, which is fine. I mean, you need to kind of bounce back and forth and understand structure. But it just doesn't work for me when I'm trying to be creative because I need the freedom to like maybe go a different way. It's like, hey, what's and if I've drawn it all out, it gets in my way, and it's that exact thing you were talking about where it freezes you. It's like they write the outline and they can't figure out how to write the story to go with the outline. And so, I mean, now this is just one way of looking at it. I mean, you can come at this however you want. If sometimes you need an outline, it depends on what you're doing, and it depends on you, on how you work. For me, that both Judge and I think we have similar processes where we kind of have a plan and we kind of leave it open. I think Michael, you're much more structured when it comes to this stuff.
I am also not writing things that are anywhere near as long. So maybe there's an element of that in the sense that you're permitting yourself to meander a little bit inside of the creativity. For me, I am doing either short story stuff like blog entries or nonfiction material that's incredibly structured and needs to be ordered. And so looking at that through a very dictatorial sort of platform like an outline helps me to keep on task. And I also work in probably a very different way too, where again, I've mentioned this before, but I'm a very nonlinear writer. Even with the fiction, I'll often write the last sentences or the last paragraph first, and I'll write the opening close to first, sometimes first, but I focus on those two things, and then the arc, from point A to point B, point Z, whichever one you like. And that itself, even I'll throw in little bits and pieces of stuff, and then I'm editing some of that and I'm building up more and more. And then all of a sudden, it's finally a draft has materialized that the story is mostly there, if not all of the material is there, dialogue and window dressing and the rest. And I do that really with everything, whether it's like video, audio, music stuff, writing. I just kind of jump in and make touches on things here and there. And even yesterday, and Nicholas knows this because I commented on it last night, I worked on, in very small amounts, a little bit of music yesterday, a little bit for an essay, and a little bit of writing for the paperback that'll come out in the fall. And very minimal things, like incredibly small. I did a lot of other stuff, but those are the three things in terms of like what I consider to be legitimate writing that I got done. And, there's a larger outline structure that all that stuff is fitting into. But if only a sentence strikes me at some given time, I'm going to grab that sentence, or I'm going to grab that melody, and I'm going to get it down and make sure that it's documented, because I don't want it to get lost in thought or in other activities that I'm engaged in. So that's some of my perspective on outlining. If the other guys want to talk about outlining, feel free. I don't, maybe it's something you like, maybe it's something you don't.
Just make another comment while we're waiting for someone to step up. I think you may be right in at least part about the length issue, because I had something a lot more like an outline for the short story that was only, 20 pages or whatever, a double space. And as far as serendipity between us here on the space, my little short story I just finished involved Princes of Transylvania and had a character named Tepes. So it's in the Vlad the Impaler spirit there.
It's funny how much thematic overlap there is today in that regard. It's good to see. Yeah, Nick, JF, did you guys use outlines? Do you have thoughts on outlining? Are you anti-outline? Anything really?
Well, I'm more of a I definitely do better when I have a plan. So I I don't necessarily write a like formal outline per se. Um and also because my writing time is kind of catch as catch can, what I've been doing a lot of lately is voice notes where I'll open notes on my phone and I'll um hit the microphone and do like speech to text and just spew out a whole bunch of ideas and go back to it later and say, oh, I like this part. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to do this, and I'll throw them together into the story, work them in. Um, but I do have at least an unwritten outline in my head. Like I know what's going to happen. It's just getting the characters there. I know where the story is headed. I mean, it's a little bit easier because I'm working with historical events because there are certain things that, actually happened in history. So it's like I've got to hit those, I'm going to hit those beats. Because I'm going to try to stay as close to even though there are fantastical elements in this story, I am going to try and stick to at least the historical timeline as close as possible. Um, but I guess I'm kind of what people refer to as a plantser, where I'm not exactly a pantser, but I'm a little looser than a plotter.
I hear that. I don't think anyone is really just either one. You know what I mean? I think we're all kind of a bit of both. And, some of us lean in one direction more than the other. But I think you have to have sort of a combination. I mean, and yeah, if you're doing Dracula, you're doing Vlad. Obviously you've got some historical stuff you need to stick to. So I mean, you've got a scaffold sort of built in already that you're working with, and it's where you go within that framework is kind of um that's where the I think the creativity happens to a certain extent. And I think that I don't think it does anybody any favors to say I am this or I am that. It's like, just do what's working in the scenario. I mean, sometimes maybe you need to just write it all out and then, write like the old school, like you're doing a essay for school, or sometimes you just need to kind of free flow it. I mean, it I'm not a real big fan of just saying this is how I do it and I can only do it this way. I mean, it changes. I think the process is mutable, and I think the more work you do and the more you practice your writing, the more, you allow the process to develop. It evolves as you do it, and you evolve as well in terms of how you proceed, right? So, hey Nick, what's so
Hey, I heard you say that you shouldn't commit to I like it this way and I only do it this way. However, I only like outlining and I will only do it that way. Me personally. Of course, you got to eventually write, right? But no, just I think everybody's different. It all depends on what's your style, what you want to read, and what you want to write. Right? Me personally, I love a good like story, plot, structure, characters. I have read some things, however, where it's really just like poetry, where somebody is just like in a trance-like state. They're just painting beautiful words, beautiful sentences. Um, and there might not be a ton of structure to what's going on, and that's fine. I've enjoyed those kind of things, but me, man, I love a good story with like a good setup, a good climax. They say that when you're telling jokes, it's all about the punchline and all of the story of the joke is like a lead up to the punchline, in such that the punchline is delivered and it's like an epiphany for the person who's reading it. Man, I'm all about that in my fiction personally. And so, like, for me, I need a really good outline, really good structure, and then I start to fill it in. And even like the chapters, I'll outline the chapters. I know that, like, okay, this chapter has to take place in the broad scheme of the whole story, and there's like, okay, now how do I want to set up this chapter? I always personally start with the end in mind, because that's what I like to read. That's how I'm comfortable writing. And but like I said, different strokes for different folks. I have a lot of friends, folks I met through Twitter, who just have such a way with words. They're truly just like taking a paintbrush to the white piece of paper, and they can spin sentences, and they have a way with words that I will never be able to touch, and it's beautiful. And I really appreciate what they write, and it's just different. It's like I said, it's just different. I prefer to read a different style. I like everything. Like, I'm not a picky eater, but I have favorite meals kind of thing. It's the same way with my writing and my reading. And yes, I'm all for finding what works for you and sticking with it personally.
I mentioned on a previous space that I took a class with Donald Moss, who wrote Writing the Breakout Novel. And he was a big New York agent. So he's read thousands of books that came in over the transom. And he said, he called it organic writing and outlining. And he said, he's the one who said that for an organic writer, your first draft is your outline. But he said he got plenty of good books from both types of writing, and often you couldn't tell. So while there are people who write kind of stream of consciousness and they're doing it without an outline, a lot of people who are writing without an outline are doing that organization also. They just do it at a later stage. My favorite description of writing, at least the way I see the process, comes from Sir Terry Pratchett, who said that it was like seeing mountain peaks, but wandering into the mist between the mountains to find out what was there. And I really think there's 3 types of writing, not 2 types. We tend to divide it into 2 types, and that does not, to me, reflect what I see in writers. I think that the outliners are like the guys who wait till the mist clears and they can see the whole landscape. The organic writers are guys who can see the peaks. They know the real main outline of their story, but they're wandering in to discover part of it as they go. And the real pantsers are guys who the whole thing is in the mist. And they're not writing kind of organically with a kind of a plot. They're just writing without really knowing where they're going. And I've often not really liked the term pantsing, because I think it collapses those 2 types of writers who are quite different from each other into one category.
I feel like we're transitioning things from outlining into writing and drafting. I feel like that's very organic in and of itself. So let's consider more along those lines. I myself will write. I'm a slow writer. It takes me a long time. But I'll write and I'll edit little bits as I'm jumping around. I'll catch stuff, because I'm moving around, so I'll see things maybe that I didn't see before. We have talked about Grammarly. Sometimes I'll make a run with that to catch some things. And then obviously for me, like, the final straw on the camel's back is the audiobook performance, which I do prior to releasing a paperback or an ebook. So I have that recording, but it's basically like the final fine-tooth comb of working through these lines. Like, if I'm reading them and they come out seeming a little clunky, or I'm losing the perspective on what is being narrated, then I feel that readers or listeners will too. No one's closer to the work than ourselves. And that is also, in a sense, how we put on blinders, because we who are writing this stuff are so intimately in tune with what's happening, and it exists so ingrained in our mind that sometimes we don't think about how to get some of those connections that we are that it seems so obvious to us onto the page. So that's some of the way, that I move from like writing and drafting. The outlining I consider to be sort of part of the drafting process as well, into the editing and processing the work. How do you guys move through some of those things?
I've said this before. I think what most people would call a first draft is sort of really my outline in a way. And I'm filling in blanks when I come back through. It's like there'll be all the pieces are there, but I'll be finding stuff. So I'm sort of, it's like a combo for me. I sort of write really detailed outlines that aren't really outlines, I guess, is the best way I could say it. But, you know, thousands of words are not really outlines. But I mean, you know, I just agree that you have to find the process that works for you, and you have to be willing. And mine isn't necessarily going to work for you. I think we're just sharing ideas. But the thing I think that's important too is a flexibility, a mutability with allowing that process to evolve and understanding your own process, kind of understanding it is what it is you do to be able to push yourself forward to get things done. I think that's super important. um and I think discussions like this, it's like I didn't realize that that's what I do until fairly recently, that I'm sort of just writing my first drafts are really sort of outlines, and there's a lot to fill in. When I say that, it's like, hmm, a 20,000 word outline is still uh, is not really an outline, but it's also not really a first draft. It's like a scaffold. I mean, Jagi does the same thing sort of that I do, I think, and are similar. So you pointed that out, and that was super useful. And I think probably the most useful thing you can do is kind of figure out what it is that you're doing and how to maximize your process. Figure out how to. What's the word I want? I want to say how to work within your own process, how to get that, to do that more effectively when you start understanding what it is you're doing. I would say that.
It's a good description. I used to often think of it as when I was a kid, we'd have these overhead projectors in school where they would lay down a clear piece of paper that had like red, and then one had green, and one had blue, and making a final picture that showed you like the blueprint of the school or whatever it was, with the the libraries in red and the hallways are in blue or whatever it was. I often think of writing like that. It's like when I started, I just would start with dialogue and basic action. Then I do a second write through for the descriptions, and then another one for emotional stuff. Now I've got it down so I can do everything but the emotions the first time. Um, but to me, it's like that. It's like, okay, I'm going through. I usually do it chapter by chapter, and then I go, and I do that one several times, and I go on. But you could do the whole thing, or you could do a little part. But I go through it and I get parts of it done, and then I go through and I get the next layer of that overlay thing. But I know some people, like my husband, just does it all in his head, and he does it all at once, and he almost never does any editing or changes at all. Um, so I really think each of us are working a different way. And what I liked what you said, Heidi, about knowing it is when I finally figured out this is how I work. Now I can actually do things like it's okay to make this first draft kind of light, because I know I'll enjoy it more if I get it done and then can go over it more carefully, or other things like that, where you figured out something about your process, and now you can play to your process to make it easier for you. And I think just freeing yourself up from feeling like you have to do it the way someone else is doing it really can help, in the process of getting the words on the page.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's really the key to all of this. It's like you got to figure out how you're going to get the work done. I mean, and that's what an outline is. It's just figuring out what you're going to do. And that's whatever the process is, you have to figure it out.
Yeah, I like everything you guys are talking about. I also, appreciate the discussions to assess style, benefits, approaches, better understanding of my process and my approach to writing through the discussion here. In addition to, because this is a thematic space. The ones I host every other Wednesday, that's very much more just a free form discussion. Whatever is on everybody's mind, that's kind of what we talk about. Here we try to actually kind of target what is getting talked about, which I think gives us not only a more narrow focused, but the potential to be, very in depth and thorough about the conversation too. So, gosh, this is a tech question here for everybody. What tools or strategies have helped you in the area of outlining, writing, drafting, editing? For me, again, I mentioned earlier, I use Grammarly. They're not always correct. Jagi's talked on this before. I use to some degree Obsidian, not as much as I probably should. I use printing it out and actually physically working through the text in addition to kind of digital. I use the Read, so the audio equipment to work on that stuff. And sometimes you find, this has literally happened with projects where you're doing the audiobook read and all of a sudden you discover you're like, no, actually this stuff has to move. This stuff is fine, but it actually needs to move to a different location in the story. Sometimes that happens. Gosh, what other tools? Obviously, Notes app, huge for me. Notes app, and then, that's really the number one place where I start writing is just notes, because an idea comes, I track it in there, and then I start kind of building on it. Heidi, I know you use Scrivener, but anybody who's using any technology I didn't mention or wants to endorse some of the technologies that I mentioned, feel free, raise your hand, chime in. This is your chance.
Well, since you called me out, I write in Scrivener. I really love it because I can just put, have a doc in a folder, and it's just the best way to put chapters. And if I have ideas or something, I can plop it into a folder and everything. I'll be honest though, for like if I'm sitting down, I'm having that what's happening next, needing to do some sort of outlining. My favorite tool is a piece of paper and a pen that I write down with my hand. That to me is the best way to kind of get it, where I can create a flow chart. It's very visual and it's very tactile, and it works really well for me. If I'm doing flat out, I'm gonna say flow chart outline, because it's more, I will do it more visually than just writing a list. I'll have boxes and everything. This goes here, this goes here, this needs to cut, that sort of thing. Doing it on a computer makes no sense to me. Well, it's not that it doesn't make sense. It's like I'm more focused on trying to figure out how to get the computer program to work than just writing it out on a piece of paper, which I find to be really useful. Those are my two favorite texts. I've been using AI too. I've been messing around with AI, not for writing, but for for grammar checks and stuff like that. Instead of using something like Grammarly, I'm seeing if like ChatGPT, how it does it. It does pretty good. And it also, it's a little smart. I would, feel free to disagree with me if anyone's used it, but I think it's a little smarter in terms of being able to grab nuance and being able to grab your style of writing. I have to constantly shut it down when it starts to try writing for me, because I guess a lot of people use these things to do their writing. So I'm like, don't write for me. Just tell me what's grammatically incorrect, or tell me, what's going on. Is there a redundancy in a word? There's things that you do, because we all have our little quirks that we do in our writing. I used to notice that as an editor. There are sort of everyone has like a collection of things they do, that are incorrect. Just, I mean, grammatically incorrect, specifically to be black and white. And then sometimes there's stylistic things that we grab onto that are that we have to balance with stuff, to make sure we're not overdoing it or underdoing it, or whatever it is. But so I found that the AI can be really helpful at grabbing that stuff more so than well, I've never really used Grammarly, but I was using Pro Writing Aid and I still have it. So it's kind of nice because it'll pull a doc out of Scrivener so I can work directly in the Scrivener doc, and then it's fixed in Scrivener. So that is a lot easier. That sort of fluidity, being able to have it come into my document, is really nice so that I'm changing it all in one place. But the problem I had with Pro Writing Aid is it even though it's sort of set up for writers more so than, say, I think Grammarly, which is more set up for, non-creative writing. Pro Writing Aid is more directed at creative writing, but it still sort of pushes towards it, it just it doesn't acknowledge your tone, I guess, is the best way to put it. It doesn't necessarily acknowledge your style, which I found the AI is more capable of grasping that concept of your particular style. And I so and basically doing the same grammatical stuff. And obviously this is not perfect. It still hallucinates sometimes and does weird things. And I won't let it work. I won't let it wants to like take my document and edit it and hand it back to me, and I'm not really comfortable with that, because I don't trust it enough to do that, to give it that level of control. But I'm sort of trying to work with it, and I find it interesting. I might pop some stuff back into Pro Writing Age, see if they've developed that program some more. But these are, I don't know how interesting this is to anybody, but these are things that I've messed around with. Yeah. So I don't know what else. What have you guys been doing?
I want to just endorse the reading out loud. I know Michael mentions this, but uh, I find it very useful. I used to read everything out loud to my mom, and when she left us, I said I was going to go sit on a bench and read to her, but I never actually take the time to do that. I wish I did. But I just read both my short story and a couple scenes from my current novel to my husband. And not only do you catch a lot of things like, I use this word twice in a row and it doesn't sound good, but I had somehow lost two lines in two different places, one line in two different places out of my novel. And I wouldn't have seen it if I hadn't read it out loud. Until about a year and a half ago, I wrote on Word 2000, and I miss it so much. I love Word 2000. There's only one thing in the modern word that I like, and it doesn't do a lot of things I want it to do. But the modern Windows just doesn't run it well anymore. I started crashing all the time and losing stuff, and you can't do that. So now I just write on the current version of Word, or maybe the very previous version of Word. I don't like it as much as I like the old one. But I used to use Grammarly with joy, and it would just flag spelling and very simple grammar issues like punctuation, which I needed and I appreciated. But it's gotten, I use the word extraordinarily loosely, smarter, and it is much less useful than it used to be.
I think that's what they're thinking, or just essay writing. These are their two goals. creative writing is sort of a different beast, and you just have to be aware of that. But I will say, every single it's not just some writers, like every writer, everyone has their quirks, and they're weird things that they do. That's they're it's like, and I saw this when I was editing magazine editing. We had columnists, and I'd edit the same columnist month after month. Each one of them, you start realizing that each one of them has their stylistic quirks that are their style, but also there's errors within it. So you have to clean it. You clean them up. And it's like I noticed, like, people have, like, there's like 3 or 4 grammatical errors that any writer has that they just consistently do. Like you're talking about the run-ons or something. And it's sort of a stylistic thing, but at the same time, it's like you got to clean it up but try and maintain their style. So I mean, that's what a human editor does. Grammarly, none of these fixes are going to do that. They're not going to maintain your style. They're just going to make it generic. So that's where you have to really be paying attention. And I think one of the key things that anyone can do is know what your errors are, know what your quirks are. Again, it's like if you know those, then you can work around them, and you can use them to sort of, I mean, they're sort of stylistic things in a way. But if you know what they are, you can use them more stylistically to kind of remove the grammatical errors. So this is something to consider.
I know one mistake I make is the punctuation at the end of dialogue. And it's not because I don't know what it is. I know exactly what it's supposed to be. It's because as I'm writing, come here, she said, or come here, she ran down the road. I haven't decided which one of those it's going to be. So, whether there's a comma at the end or a period, I often mess up because when I get to the end of the dialogue, I haven't decided yet what's going to follow, and therefore I put the wrong thing. But little things like that, it's really annoying for all my editors because it's just, an annoying thing they think I should be able to get right. But as you say, if you catch yourself with these things, then you try to remember when you do, when you're doing a read through, okay, I got to check the dialogue and make sure that I'm not, imposing on my editor by making too many mistakes of this kind.
All fair, all reasonable points. And I think that it's funny that we went sort of from the technology side of things into the advanced stages of editing there, almost naturally, starting to think about the finished product, the end result of all this work that you've done, and considering tools for publishing, which, again, depending on your format or what you're doing, similarities, overlaps, but have to be consider these things. Let's at least start with formatting and design, right? For me, when it comes to formatting and design, I'm using GarageBand for audio. I'm using Pages for the ebooks and the paperbacks. I am using GIMP for design in terms of like covers and stuff. Now, some of these are programs that come with Mac OS. Some of them are more intuitive than others. GIMP is not an intuitive program. It took me a while to sort it out. In fact, funny thing there was when I first started using it, there was a version, I think, that it didn't like the chips that I had, so I had to go download the other version of the program. That's just, not totally unheard of, but at the same time, it's just kind of surface that stuff a little more readily would be my thinking on it. In terms of audio, I try to keep it as simple as possible. I have a collection of presets that I use that I kind of run through. Even for book design, this is, maybe there's some good, maybe there's some bad, but like formatting, there are some templates that I use, but at the same time, every time I use one of those templates, it means that the book I'm going to release is going to be following the same kind of style guide. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not. And also, it's going to be restricted to the same size as a previous book. Now, for like trade paperback size, that's fine. But there's some things I think about occasionally where I'm like, man, it would be nice to make this a different sized book. And it kind of starts with the formatting side of things. What are you guys doing for formatting?
It reminds me, for some reason, that when I was with Tor, they switched from mass market to trade paper because they decided that the way the finances were working, they were making more money with the trade paper than the mass market at that time, due to the price of paper and other things. But they switched in the middle of my series. So my series had 2 mass market books, and the third book came out in trade paper. So it's impossible to match them. And people complained about that, and there was nothing I could do. But
can you tell us some of the specific differences between trade paperback and mass market?
So mass market means the short one that we used to think of as a paperback. They're like, I don't know, maybe I don't remember the exact size, but they're the kind that we called a paperback in the past. Trade paper is the slightly taller one. Maybe one's 6 inches, the other's 9 inch. And the trade paper often, like my very first job in publishing, I worked as an intern for Blue Jay Books, which was a New York publisher that was publishing trade paperback science fiction. And the trade paperback at that time was thought to be elegant. It was like not as expensive as a hardback, but it's similar in size and shape to a hardback. So the print's a little bigger, it's a little nicer looking, and the binding was often a little better. So the mass market were short, and they tended to emphasize quick and easy and cheap. And those are the ones that the bookstores were allowed to rip the covers off. Maybe they still do. They rip the covers off and throw them out rather than send them back, because back then it was too expensive to ship them back. And so those were but what happened was, when paper became more expensive, the trade paper ones, because they look a lot like hardcovers, they could charge, let's say, $15 for a trade paperback, and someone would think it was okay. But people were used to spending like $2 to $6 for a mass market. And so when the mass market became about, let's say, $8 to $10, customers started wanting to buy the more elegant $15 one rather than $10 on what they thought was a $6 book. So a lot of the publishers switched. They thought, okay, we're just going to offer a slightly better, slightly larger product, and it's still thought to be more elegant. So just like that 6 to 9 size, or even a little bit bigger than that, 6 inch by 9 inch. So that was the idea. And I mean, it makes sense. I just happen to be the victim. I don't know anyone else that happened to, like the other series I'm familiar with. They either finished the series in the same format, or they redid it or something like that. But so that's something to think about is, if your book does make it into a library or a bookstore, what kind of shape and size do you want it to be? And nowadays they say there's a lot more profit in hardcovers because people charge a lot more for the hardcovers, but they don't actually cost as much more for the person making them at the moment. So I know a number of small press that try to emphasize hardcovers because they can make a much higher profit margin off of them.
Sure. Seems reasonable. Rachel has hung out. I don't think you have been to a workshop session before. So here is at least the outset of it. Tell us about your progress, what you've been working on, how things are going, and maybe how you've been.
Oh, you want me to go now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. I don't want to cut off Heidi for what she was talking about.
We're okay. We're going to get back to that, but go ahead.
Thank you so much. Honestly, I'm so focused on client work. My business is Bad Redhead Media. And what I do is help authors with book marketing and social media. And a year ago, I was so slow, was my slowest year in business since 2011. And this year is my busiest. So I literally have had no time for the creative writing that I love to do and poetry and all that. But I have been posting on Substack every single week. And that has been for almost 3 years now.
Yeah, not to derail into that, because we are on marketing and promotion, which you are that's kind of your focal point.
It is. It is specifically for books in general, or do you think you're looking at?
Really, let's talk about books and publishing, particularly.
Okay. Any certain aspect, or?
Well, this is a topic in regards to tools for publishing,
Right.
and then as it comes up, it's kind of maybe think about release. I would say, Jagi or Heidi kind of chime in and we'll spin the conversation.
Well, I would say any advice anyone has about what we should be doing to reach readers is always welcome.
Right.
From my perspective, I think it all depends on where your reader demographic hangs out. So I see a lot of people will tell, especially I have a lot of older clients. I'm 61, so most of my clients tend to be my age or older. My oldest client is 88. So if they're on social media at all, they're on Facebook. And that makes sense because it's an older demographic anyway. But also, the majority, something like, I think it's anywhere between 70 and 80% of the world's population has Facebook. That's insane, right? So if you're writing something like memoir, literary, historical.
That's not a true statement. I'm going to just
I'm sorry, what?
I'm going to call that out. That's 70 and 80% of the world does not have Facebook.
Okay.
It's literally impossible. There's like 8 billion people on the planet. Just like there's not 6 billion users of Facebook, just to clarify. So there's over 2
Oh, you're right.
There's over 2 billion users of Facebook, but like in China, you can't even log on to Facebook.
I know. Okay. I know. So they say that it's 40% of the world's population, which translates to 3.07 billion active monthly users, according to Demand Sage. So you're right. I was off. For internet users and social media users, Facebook represents about 60% of all social media users worldwide. This is just on the Demand Sage site. So regardless, I think it's important to look at where your audience hangs out. If you tend to write erotica, romance, fantasy, romantasy, TikTok and Instagram are amazing because they tend to trend younger anyway. But don't forget about Twitter. Of course, Blue Sky is brand new. It's very, very reader and author friendly. My only concern there so far is that it's not indexed by Google. So it'll show that you have an account, but it won't show like what your posts are. Whereas that will come up if you are on Facebook or X. And X is still important. Book Twitter is still a very important hashtag. And the reason I like still being on X is because it is indexed by Google. So I would say look and kind of look around and see if you're not sure where to start. Look at alternative or comps, comparative literature. See where they're hanging out. What are they doing? And honestly, just figure out what you like and what you don't like. If you don't like TikTok, then don't make yourself be there. Just remember that may be a portion of readers that you're not going to reach otherwise because they're not going to be I'm done with that. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I had a question for you, actually, a follow up on that. So, have you used Threads at all?
Yes. Well, here's what's interesting is if you open Threads from your Instagram account, they kind of just say, "Hey, do you want an account?" And boom, you have one.
Yeah.
I do like now that you can run ads on not only Facebook and Instagram, but Threads as well. If you go into the Facebook ads module,
Mm-hmm.
it has grown significantly. And I think because it's a meta product, it was immediately indexed by Google because of their agreement. Excuse me. You are limited on space. You can only have 500 characters. Hashtags really
More
aren't
than
a thing.
here.
I'm sorry?
It's more than here. Also, the hashtag thing, what you don't have in terms of hashtagging, you do have, there are like topics. You can select topics on there.
Yeah, it's worth seeing what's trending and then seeing if what you're talking about is going to fit that. But I also like that you can now incorporate Threads into the social media management tools like Hootsuite and Buffer or Loomly or whatever. And even Blue Sky is now available on some of them as well. So if you use a scheduler, I think it's worth it. I don't spend a lot of time on Threads, but I'll go in every couple of days. It's not like Twitter, Facebook, which I'm constantly getting pinged because those are the more active platforms. And I'm managing like 70 accounts over different clients and everything. So I have to figure out where's best to spend my time. But I'm glad you asked that, Michael, because I do think that Threads has potential. A lot of people who left Twitter ended up over there.
Sure.
Do you have any insight on? So I took a click testing class at one point, and I was able to make rather effective ads. If by effective you mean that people clicked on them and some of them bought the book. Mm-hmm. But it was only when I got to the end of the class that it said it's going to take $12 to $20 for every click. Well, that's not, the people who were making money at this were the ones who had 8 and more books in a series. 12 to $20 is not going to make money for you when you're trying to sell, $6 books. I was just wondering if you had any advice on decreasing that amount of money.
That's insane. I mean, usually I aim for nothing more than 30 cents per click. So I would look at whether it gets complicated. I don't have an easy answer for you. Are you boosting a post or are you creating an original ad in the ad module? Maybe go back through and see how much were you spending per day versus per click, and then find out how that was adding up for you. And then also, I'm sure you learned about A/B testing. Try a couple different versions. I kind of like now.
That's what the class was about. It's actually a really clever way of doing it. I'll describe it really quickly in case anybody ever wants to do this. It was really brilliant. You start by picking your audience and you try to go broad, and then you just put up a statement about your book or pictures, and you put out like a dozen quotes or statements about it, a dozen pictures. And then once you pick out which ones people have clicked on, at this point, you're not even saying anything. You're just testing. You then make your ads out of the pictures and the statements that got the most attention from your potential market. And so by the time you get an actual ad, you have, a picture and a statement, and then you've put them together and you've tested them, and then you add your text. The whole thing was very cleverly done. And the result was that you could, you just threw out any statement or picture that wasn't getting the attention you wanted. So it produced a nice ad. And as I said, I could break even. I could get enough sales that it paid for the ads. I couldn't get to the point where I was getting enough sales to make money above what I was paying for the ad. So I gave it up for the time being. I figure if we get to the point we have more books out, like my husband's working on a 12-book series, it might be worth it at that point, to try again. Or if I ever put my writing class videos available and they were like, $60 for the whole course or something, it might be worth it. But I couldn't get it to work for, just selling a couple of books because the book price was just lower than the conversion price. And as I said, when I got to the end of the class, they listed $12 to $20 as what they across the board tended to spend on this process when they were doing ads. So it wasn't just me. If I'd seen that at the beginning, I probably wouldn't have taken the class.
Yeah, I try to spend. I mean, I have some ads. For example, with my Substacks, I'll only do $1 a day, pretty cheap. But I'm running it only for a week, and if I see that it's doing really well, then I'll bump it to like $2 or $3 a day, which is a really nice way to see where the traffic's coming from. I do recommend using a free tool like Booklinker. If you have Amazon Associates, as you do, you can actually add that part of that code to everything you share, and then you make a few little pennies off of stuff. But I think if you can track that and see where the clicks are coming from and where they're going to, I wish Amazon or Barnes and Noble, etc., they tell us how many sales we've made, but they don't give us it came from Facebook. That's what we don't know. That's all very hush hush. So by tracking your clicks, I use Genius Link. Booklinker is free. Genius Link is their paid product. It's like $5 a month. I track everything. I track book sales. I track uh, blog posts. I track newsletters. I track giveaway clicks because I want the information that they generally don't give you, which is very specific. Where did it come from and where did it end up? So refers and destinations, that's really important information. And that can tell you then, okay, I'm getting, 80% of my clips are coming from Facebook. Then yeah, I should continue to hang out on Facebook and also grow that and also run ads. Maybe create a group, maybe do a live. There's so many options now of things you can do. So that's it.
Yeah, I'm into it. I think that optimizing ads is kind of a perpetual discussion because it's always evolving. As soon as you figure something out, then the ad networks are going to shift the ground underneath of you to continue to make more money. And I mean, if you're into gamification and stuff like that, as soon as you buy an ad, you're basically investing. When it comes to like the digital domain on the web, as soon as you buy an ad, you're already investing for them to basically gamify against you, unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, always good to test things out. There was a woman who had a good method for advertising on Twitter about a year ago. I don't see her ads now, so maybe she's kind of exhausted the well on that one. But it was converting for her well, and she was basically getting click-throughs. She was bidding for them at the cheapest price you could, which was just unbelievably low. All the same, while everybody's still here, let's talk about resources or communities for writers and authors to participate in that can help them understand the tools for publishing in regards to formatting and design, marketing and promotion.
I can comment on this. It's interesting. I got a question the other day on my Substack from a guy who said, okay, I've converted everything to a Word doc, but I'm having trouble uploading it to Amazon. And I was like, my dude, very nice, but you can't just upload a Word doc to Amazon, right? You have to format it. So a lot of people use vellum.pub, which is, they have a free option. A good friend of mine used that to format her book, and then you can choose the voice that it reads it back to you. And her memoir It's called Mom Search for Meaning. It's by Dr. Melissa Monroe. And she said that she went ahead and had Vellum read her book to her, which is very tragic. It's about the loss of her youngest daughter, Alice, to basically SIDS. And so she had it read the book back to her in Snoop Dogg voice. And she was like, that was the only way I got through this horrific experience, was finally be able to put my book in. She didn't release an audio version with Snoop Dogg's voice, obviously, but using Vellum helped her really make it into an actual book that she could then upload to Amazon. So I think people have to realize that there is formatting involved. They may not know how to do it, and you can hire people. I don't do that, but there are people who are very good at it. So I would look at the process. If you're unfamiliar with how it all works, at least, go to Amazon and look up just how do I upload a book? What are the what's the process? What are all the marketing options? And then you'll, do that research, and then you'll be more informed. If you decide to hire someone, you'll know better what you're looking for.
Yeah, I hire somebody. In fact, I just connected Heidi to the typesetter who does my stuff. He's a fan of mine. He's read my books over and over and over again. So it's really great because he'll notice if something's out of place. But I have another friend who, for everything that's not my own books, like for the anthologies I work on and my husband's stuff, he does it. It's for either 25 or $100, depending on whether it's something for my husband who he really likes or something for someone else. But they all use Vellum.
Interesting. I've never used Vellum before. It's an online platform, or it's downloadable standalone software?
I'm not sure. I only know there's a free and a professional one. When I was working for Superversive Press, we used Jason used the professional one, but a lot of the guys that I work with now just use the free one.
Interesting. Yeah, I think basically, in general, getting to something print ready, I mean, there's just like you can start anywhere and get there. I think it kind of comes down to like what is user friendly for whatever platform OS you have or whatever your capabilities are. Heidi uses InDesign. I use Pages, and I use Kindle Create for the ebooks and stuff. Again, that's a free program, and there's a lot of different options inside of there just for layout, and the rest in terms of ebooks at the very least. And they have 4 different options inside of that too, which they kind of break down along the lines of experience and not necessarily genre so much, but like format of style, I guess. Maybe you would say like there's a graphic novel, comic book formatting choice, or there's like children's book choice, or there's a PDF 1-to-1 translation of a PDF, or there's reflowable, which is great for all text. I would say, if you're doing Amazon, kind of getting familiar with that program is probably the way to go. And it's super easy to use, and it's $0. Now, the other side of it is that is not going to be what you're going to need for paperbacks and hardbacks. So that's a thing to have to consider, is that like if you are trying to do these different formats, then you have to lay out and basically produce the formatting file for each one of those. Now, paperback and hardback with Amazon, I believe, is the same. I haven't done a hardback this year. I will.
Yeah, they're the same.
They're basically the same thing, but
Cover design is different, right?
no, not really. I mean, you size it just slightly differently.
Okay, so it is different.
You basically use the exact same thing.
Right, but you have to create a second file for it.
Yeah, but
Okay.
it's really, if you have it already designed for the paperback, it's really, not much of an effort.
Sure.
You just sort of tweak it just ever so slightly.
Yeah. But they do require a separate file for your hardback cover.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, you can use
It's a slightly different edges to it, just a tiny little bit different in how it works on the two.
Yeah, I mean, you can use, like, for the interior, the cover, I think, has to be just slightly different, but the interior can be exactly the same as
Yeah.
the paperback.
That was my understanding.
Interiors.
It's actually pretty simple to do. It's the differences between the ebook, if you're doing reflowable, which if you're doing a novel, you pretty much want to do reflowable for an ebook because people like to be able to change the font size and everything. And that's different than just putting up a PDF, which you can do for hardcover and paperback, which is pretty straightforward. I use Adobe. I'm like an Adobe Creative Suite person, and because I did that when I was in publishing, and it's kind of my go-to, and I understand it. But if you haven't been trained in it, it's really difficult, and I wouldn't suggest going there first. It's just that's my background, and that's the main reason I use it. But I mean, ultimately, it does give you a lot more flexibility than these other programs, but it's hard to use. It's a real high learning curve.
Adobe, you're saying, is high learning curve.
I think so. I think InDesign is. If you don't really know what you're doing. I mean, I got trained in it. So, I mean, and honestly, it hasn't changed that much in like 20 years because I hadn't used it for a while.
I would say, yeah. InDesign, yeah, a little more involved. I would say like than Photoshop, for example. And I would say it's probably a little bit more involved than using Word to a degree because you can really get very really into the weeds on control. Like it's a very powerful program in that sense, but you're going to pay a monthly fee, and also if you don't have the needs that you might think for InDesign, I'll be honest with you, paying for InDesign to do a text book or even minimal graphics laid into a book is just massive overkill and not necessary.
Well, for me, I'm using the whole Creative Suite.
Yeah.
So I'm using Adobe Audition for audiobooks. I'm using Photoshop. I'm using Illustrator. I'm using InDesign. I get what you're saying. It gives me flexibility going forward if I want to do more complicated things.
Yeah.
But I'm using this whole suite of things. I've got including sometimes I've even used Premiere to do some stuff. So, I mean, it's not just InDesign that you're paying for, and they give you a discount for the suite. But I hear you. It's like, it's just where do you want to put your money?
Not in Adobe.
Well, you don't want to put it there. It's for me, like I said, with my kind of how I've learned to do these things, it's almost easier for me to do that than to do it. I understand it. And so it just makes sense to me than to do it in Word. So like I can lay out like the novella I've got. So I had to put together templates and everything for my novel, which is out. That's like 400 pages. Once I had them together, I could throw it together. So now when I threw the novella into InDesign, it took me an afternoon to lay out a 140-page book. So, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you just have to decide because I could just flop it into the master pages and the templates I've set up. So it's you just have to decide where you want to put your time and your money. For me, it just makes sense because it's my background. I wouldn't recommend people jump into InDesign unless you're going to get thoroughly trained in it because it is not the easiest program to use. It really isn't. And it's not necessarily intuitive. We all know how to use Word And these other programs are really designed for people who are writers more. It's just, I have a design side background where I was doing magazine layout for a decade. So, I mean, that's why I never really recommend it. It's just what I do because of my weird background.
Yeah.
So I'll just throw that out there.
First, hello to the new people who've come on. Second, I really think what you just said about time is one of the keys. I've thought many times about getting into using Vellum myself because, you really want to keep the money down when you're putting these things out. But I look at it and I go, okay, I'm good at this program. I'm good at this program. I have only this amount of time. I have my family and I'm trying to write. And anytime I spend into another part of the process that I don't already know is time I'm not writing. So I'm trying to juggle between, I'd love to be able to do the whole thing from beginning to end. I do every other part of it. And, maybe I just have to let some things go and concentrate on the part that I really need to get done.
Fair. The trade-off here, in addition to time, is the money side of it, where anytime that you're incurring cost for publishing, you then are basically, you got to put those costs up against what you are intending to recoup. So that's something I think people should be considerate of. And given that most books out in the world don't recoup their cost from large publishers or even at the indie side of things, keeping your costs down one way or another is giving you a shorter path to potential profitability with your books. That's my thinking on it.
Heidi, I like what you said. I think that's so important as authors, but also as business people. If you don't think of yourself as a business person, as a writer, then you need to rethink that. So the point really is know what you're good at and what you're not good at. Either try to learn or hire someone to help you. I know, like, I'm not into graphic design, Photoshop, any InDesign, any of that stuff. Canva even confuses me, and everyone says it's so easy, but that's not my strength. So I have hired people who do those things for me so that I can focus on the things that I'm really good at. So I love what you said there, Heidi. I think that's just so important for us to realize, and it's okay. I remember we don't have to be good at everything. When I first started out in this, or in the 2010s, around that time, one of the gals who was like a mentor to a bunch of us new indie writers, we were in a group, said, "You have to learn to format." And I said, "No, I don't." I don't have to do anything. I'm an adult. Don't tell me what I have to do. But I knew it would not, it's like doing math for me. So I think that, anyway, I'll just end there. But I think that's so important. And also, you can go to places like Readsy or Indie Author Ali or IBP, whatever it's called. There's an indie reader, to find places that are vetted. And then you can say, okay, I'm not taking a chance. If I pay this person, $100 to format my book, I should get a formatted book out of it. So just do that due diligence before you hire somebody. But I don't think we should feel bad that we're not good at something, and that it's okay to hire somebody if we can afford it.
This is the point, and it's why I don't really say, "Oh, I use InDesign. You should all do that." It's like, I don't think that's a good idea. It's just that I had the background, which I said like 20 times. But yeah, you're absolutely right. You have to pick and choose your battles, especially for those of us who are indie, because they're so. You're basically in a scenario where you're in charge of everything, and so you have to decide what you're gonna hand off, and and how much you can afford to hand off is the other thing. You have to budget it. you can spend a small fortune putting out an indie book, and it'll be gorgeous, and you may never make your money back, and you may not care. You may just want to have done it, and that's fine. I mean, as long as you're realistic about that. But I think most of us would like to have some level of success, would like to have readers. So I mean, I think the layout stuff, I mean, it's important to a point, but really it's just about clarity. It's like, can someone comfortably read the book? Is the font large enough? Is there enough white space on the page? I mean, it's very simple, really. And I think that we get lost in the weeds. If you can do Canva or Vellum or whatever, it's fine. I mean, even the KDP stuff, the KDP Create, I believe, where you put in the ebook, I mean, it puts together a perfectly readable book. And ultimately, I mean, it's nice if we can make everything pretty. And, I like designing covers and making them all pretty and everything. But the thing is, you really have to focus on the story. I mean, that's the main thing that you're doing. All this other stuff is just sort of dressing, and we like it. I mean, it's easier to market something with a pretty cover, and if it looks professionally done, people respond to it. But for the most part, it's just it doesn't have to be this monstrous thing that you do. It doesn't have to like get in your way. It's like you said, it's like, I'm just not going to do this layout. I'm going to have someone else do it. It's just not going to be the thing I do. And, that's totally reasonable. You have to pick your battles. I think, that's a really good point to make, Rachel, because it can get overwhelming. It's just like it's like we started out this discussion talking about how outlines can get us too bogged down and we never start writing. Well, it's like if you try and do all of the stuff and not hand some of it off, you're going to get too bogged down and you'll never finish your story. You'll never do the writing. You have to think of it that way. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think you're right. And I mean, I think it applies, across the board. When I was editing, I was working for a small press and it closed. So now I'm editing some of the same people that I had been friends with and working with. And it was very frustrating because on one hand, I knew that what I was doing was helping improve their story a lot. But I knew that even with that, most of them were not going to make back any money on it just because of the way the marketing and the setup is, So I was charging almost nothing for editing because, I was like, in a fair world, I'd be charging a lot for this. In fact, occasionally somebody has paid me quite a bit for it. But if we go out, we get a good cover, we get a good editor, we do our best on it, we get it formatted perfectly. And a lot of the writers I was working with, never made more than $100, So it was hard for me to charge them. I want to say one other thing about that. When I was working with the small press, I know that people who are not writers don't understand the finances of what's going on right now. I wanted to write a letter to give out to people when they came in that explained that a lot of indie books only made about $10 and that $100 was actually quite astonishing. And that while some of them went on to make a lot of money, a lot of them didn't. Because I thought it was unfair to authors coming in who had no idea what the situation was. And I kept seeing authors with small press being really disappointed when the reality hit, when the checks came or didn't. And I asked around on Facebook with some writing groups and some editing groups and stuff. And everybody said to me, oh, if a publisher gave me that letter, I wouldn't go with them. And I was like, isn't it fair to tell people what the current situation was? Oh, no, I expect the publisher to make my book the one that gets to 1,000 or something. And it just seems so unfair to me, that attitude where it was like, I wanted to be honest with my writers and they thought that was a really bad idea.
I'm going to out myself a little bit because I used to hang out on Clubhouse with a writing and publishing group there. And as much as I liked the discussion, and I always try to make it very focused on the realities of it. I only had 2 books out when I was doing that, and I was working on my 3rd at the time. And the thing there was the folks that ran that group were basically selling services to authors, first-time authors, new authors, basically like editing, promo, social media service, and kind of like launch day party kind of thing, which was fine, whatever. But I think, in general, there are a lot of these sort of entities that are predatory on authors that don't know, writers that don't know the situation as they're getting into becoming an author, and they're willing to stack up all of this cost against a writer to sell service and say, this is how you need to do it. You need to do all these things so you're official, and you have access to all this other stuff, and it doesn't matter at all, because in the grand scheme of things, you've now just made your costs so high that a massive number of these authors are just never going to even get into the realm of discussion in terms of profitability, unfortunately. We are currently entering our last 5 minutes for today. So I wanted to say this before because we had people hanging out, and I would love for you to have had time to come up and talk. Unfortunately, we're going to get into the wrap up phase for today. All that said, we do the writer's block every Tuesday here on Twitter. Typically more thematic. Once a month, we do this workshop discussion, and hopefully it's been valuable. Hopefully we've covered some things that are even interesting or engaging to listen to. So for today, any closing thoughts from the 3 ladies on stage? I would say if you have something you want to say, keep it to a minute for me, please.
Well, I think it's been a great discussion. I did finish something. I finished my audiobook. I'll throw that out there. It's in the pill somewhere. If anyone would like, since you're in here, if anyone would like a promo code, which gives you free access to it, DM me. I'm happy to share. That's all I will say.
Thanks for bringing me up here, Michael. And I have this on my schedule now, so hopefully I'll make it more often.
Nice.
My only other thought that I just noticed that's pretty new-ish is you can now, if you have an ebook on Amazon, if you go into your KDP, you can create an AI reading voice. Mm-hmm. It's very clearly labeled that this is being read by AI, but it's free for you to create that file, and there's no coding or formatting on our part. So I just wanted to let people know that's an additional opportunity you may be unaware of with regard to creating audiobooks, and it's absolutely free. Yeah. So I was really excited to learn about it. I've started transitioning some books over to that, and I've probably sold about 50 copies of one of my memoir poetry books called Broken People. So it's interesting. It's an additional revenue stream. I don't think we're going to make a huge amount of money on this, but for people like ourselves who are indie authors and we don't have a publishing house behind us, it's a really good option.
Yeah, we actually did mention it last week. Now there's a catch on that, is that that locks you in. You can't necessarily use that production outside of KDP.
Correct.
Jagi, thoughts? Any closing comments for today?
I enjoyed it very much, and I learned a lot. And I also know some narrators if anybody's on ACX and ever needs one. I'm happy to try to throw work their way.
Yeah, we're right here.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks everybody.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate you coming up and co-hosting. First time. Give her a round of applause for the planning and execution. So before we close, up above in the nest, there's a handful of things you might want to get a look at in the sense of things you don't know about. So the previous session, workshop session from last month is up on all your favorite podcasting platforms. Also, once a month, I put out an article on Substack. We talked about it earlier, but we'll mention it again. There's an article over on my Substack on writing. One of the number one topics writers write about is writing to other writers. And I'm doing it too. You can go read. You could subscribe. You could get that dropped into your inbox once a month at no charge. Additionally, I have a couple of poll questions up there, and they're open for one more day. So if you would be so kind as to vote in these things so I can better understand the landscape out there. I'm revamping my Patreon and relaunching it. I've started posting on there again. It's been a number of years. I haven't used it in practically 6 years, I think. It's been a long time. Getting that going again. Also, if you are familiar with Roku, let me know if you have Roku. If you are aware of the streaming platform Filmzy, vote on that. And then finally, the Film 3 space I co-host with Chris Hackett. This week, we want all hands on deck for protesting. Basically, someone is trying to trademark through the Copyright Office the term Film 3, which has been a communal term. This woman is trying to snork it up and make it her private property. We want to stop that, and you should too. So come and talk about it with us on Thursday at this same time. As for today, this has gone well. Actually, hold on just a second. The July Grand Sumo tournament started on Sunday. Very contentious, all sorts of interesting goings on in the upper ranks. You can catch all of the daily action on NHK World, available on the web or through your streaming devices. But we'll wrap it up here for today. Do appreciate you hanging out, and we'll talk again before too long.